of those interest groups, special interest groups. We've now got some young people who are going to come on stage who have some questions from other young people, because we thought, given that they are the future, and this was, of course, here they are, but round of applause for these people. And I should make a point here that there was a period of time, James, where you weren't really speaking out, and it wasn't until you had your grandchild and you realised that the future was this lineage of children that really sparked you to speak. So I guess that's why we thought it would be good to have some questions from some people who are far younger and have much more invested in it than we do, as sad old men. Well, you might not be sad. And
Well, kia ora, James. A couple of weeks ago, Guyana and Norway signed an agreement around carbon credits and offsets. It involved Norway paying Guyana up to $250 million by 2015 if Guyana protected its forests from deforestation. The money that Guyana received from Norway was going into renewable and sustainable energy sources like solar panels and hydro dams. This was an amazing agreement that was formed by these two countries. However, this agreement did not have the attention of many members of the public worldwide. Why are we not celebrating and encouraging these sorts of deals? And do you think that countries collaborating like this is perhaps a way many countries can control their carbon credits? And what are your perceptions on these sorts of trade?
Yes, as I mentioned, I think that it's going to be very difficult to get a global agreement through the Kyoto Protocol type approach, where you've got 160 nations, each one demanding something, or many of them. So I think that those agreements such as the one you mentioned are a good way to go. And I've been suggesting that as far as how we can get to a system where we have a price on carbon, if we could get, because I was in China a few months ago, and I found that they are realizing they have very high air pollution and water pollution, so they want to move toward clean energies, and they are investing a tremendous amount of money. They're now the largest producers of solar power and wind power, and they are thinking about putting a fee or a tax on carbon emissions so that they will not become addicted to fossil fuels the way some Western countries have. And if they would come to an agreement with some other countries, like perhaps the European Union, then, and say they're both going to have a carbon fee, then they could, by saying those countries that do not want to have a carbon fee, they will put a border duty on products from those countries. It may put enough pressure on the other countries in the world that they will also join this type of arrangement. And that's the way, what we would need to do in order to phase out, on the long run, fossil fuels and move to clean energies.
Hi, James. The countries that signed the Kyoto Protocol are trying to reduce their carbon dioxide emissions. How are these emissions measured in an accurate and unbiased way, and why do they measure carbon dioxide when gases like methane could have greater effects? This question was submitted by Isabel Verney of age 17, Takapuna Grammar.
Yeah, the emissions after the Kyoto Protocol have actually increased faster than they were increasing before the Kyoto Protocol. There are a few countries that reduced their emissions, but many did not. Even those that agreed they were going to reduce them did not. And the reason is very simple. As long as the fossil fuels are the cheapest energy, somebody burns them. It's very hard to, as I say, it's as certain as the law of gravity. So you have to put a price and make the fossil fuels pay for their cost to society. Now, The part of your question about methane, it is true that a methane molecule is actually a much stronger greenhouse effect than carbon dioxide. But the thing about the carbon dioxide from fossil fuels is that once we take it out of the ground and burn it and put it in the atmosphere, it will stay in the atmosphere or ocean system for thousands of years, for several millennia, 10 to 20,000 years. Well, methane, once you reduce the sources of methane, the amount in the atmosphere goes down in about 10 years. So it's a very, and right now, methane is a significant greenhouse gas, almost half as much. There are many more CO2 molecules than methane molecules. So even though the methane molecule is much stronger, there aren't nearly as many. But it's causing an effect almost half as large as that of CO2. And so we will need to find some ways to encourage agricultural practices and capture methane at landfills, and it comes out of coal mines. So when you do coal mining, it comes out. So we'll have to reduce those sources on the long run, but it's not the emergency, because whenever we do reduce them, methane will go down quickly. Carbon dioxide we can't get back. It'll stay there 10,000 years. So that's why we have to stop we cannot burn all the fossil fuels. We're going to have to leave most of the remaining coal in the ground.
Hi, I'm Isabel, and one of the biggest fears about climate change is that positive feedback is leading us to a tipping point where we'll have runaway global warming. And by positive feedback, I mean things like when glaciers melt, and instead of ice reflecting sunlight, you've got the earth warming, like absorbing sunlight and melting more ice. So my questions are, what is the most significant type of positive feedback in terms of the effect they have on the planet? And how close are we to the tipping point? What will happen if we pass the tipping point?
Yeah. Well, she's asking about amplifying feedbacks. There are some things that amplify climate change. And specifically, she mentioned that as the planet gets warmer, ice and snow melt, and that leaves a surface which is darker than the ice and snow, so it absorbs more sunlight. So that causes more warming. The danger is that we can push the system past a tipping point where the ice, for example, in Greenland or Antarctica, will begin to disintegrate. And then it will slide into the ocean, and sea level will go up many meters. So that's a tipping point we don't want to pass. And that's actually where this 350 ppm comes from. Because we know that would, if we could get back to 350 parts per million, then the planet's energy balance would be restored. Right now, there's more energy coming in from the sun than there is heat energy going out to space. And that's because of the CO2. But if we reduce the CO2 to 350, then they're back in balance. And we shouldn't be pushing the system toward a tipping point where the ice sheets disintegrate. If we stay on business as usual, then it's absolutely certain we will cause ice sheets to disintegrate. We just can't say exactly how long it's going to take to happen, but I'm quite certain it would be this century. It would be in the lifetime of my children and grandchildren. So that's why it's urgent that we not burn all the coal.
Malolele, my name is Ofoi Taumilau. So this question is by Isabel. So last week there was a huge controversy over a BBC interview where John Key insisted that New Zealand is 100% clean and green. So how clean and green are we compared to other countries in terms of the state of our environment now and effort our governments and people are making to improve the state of our environment?
Well, New Zealand is certainly green.
All those dairy farms
as
over
I
the
mentioned,
lignite mine.
I've been through the country, north and south, and it is a beautiful country. But and the amount of CO2 emitted per person by New Zealand residents is about 2 tons per year. That compares to 5 tons a year in the United States and about 2.5 tons a year in average for European countries. So New Zealand is relatively good, but in fact the emissions are increasing. And for us to solve the problem, mainly because of vehicles, I think, but for us to solve the problems, we got to get to a point where they're decreasing. So we have to have an incentive for doing that, and that's why I keep coming back to this a fee on carbon. But the most important thing is the lignite coal, because if you start to develop that, then New Zealand becomes, it's no longer cleaner than the others. It's going to actually become dirtier than most countries in terms of its CO2 emissions. And that's why we have to get people to understand that that lignite really should be left in the ground.
It certainly seems to be the key message of the trip here is that the lignite and the fee and that cost on carbon. So
Right.
That's certainly something that we can all be taking away. And I think they have a couple more questions.